Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 75 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
We're back to playing the Kaseki series for the first time in a good number of weeks. We're doing the prologue to Trails to Azure, the second game of the Crossbell series, and I think it's fitting that in episode 75, three-fourths of the way to 100, we are starting a new game in this series for the podcast.
I agree. I like that we're starting it up. We're finally we've gotten through all of the side material as far as I know, and we're going to be releasing this episode on time. So that's kind of nice too. But Kevin, I do have one criticism right off the bat, and maybe it's different for you. But when I first played Trails to Azure, I played it up with the Geofront patch. I played, the PC version. No, I didn't play the Geofront patch. I played the version before the Geofront patch, but I played it on the PC. And every time I would start the program, a deep Japanese voice would go, Ayu Densetsu, Ao no Kiseki. And that became emblematic. And the PS4 version that NISA put out, it doesn't have it. It doesn't tell me what game I'm playing in Japanese. And I want to know that. Does your version have this tagline?
It does not. I'm playing on Steam. I haven't heard any of that, but I went through this in one sitting, no loading back in. So maybe it may have done, I may have just blocked it out, not been paying attention, but I'll keep an eye out as I play more, loading into the game more and more.
Sure. I kind of doubt that that will impact things, but I'll check on the PS5 version or PS4 version as well, since I had to quit the game to go and play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which, if anybody here listening has not yet played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you should play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It is so fucking good. But this episode is not about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's about Trails to Azure.
We begin the prologue in what is a bit of a departure from the last game. The Zero prologue, we begin at the end, as it were. The SSS has been established. We're in the midway point or so of the final dungeon. Here, and I confess, I thought for a good number of minutes that it would be the same thing. We see, oh, there's Noel, Dudley, and Arios and Lloyd. That's the party. This must be the final dungeon. But as it turns out, if you remember from our discussion of the audio drama, Lloyd joins the first division while the SSS is on hiatus. And this is the end of his liaison, his assignment with the first division. So we are beginning at the beginning. The prologue is the very first in a chronological order for the events of Azure.
The prologue, in my opinion, kind of makes that audio drama unnecessary in a way because almost all of the information contained in the audio drama is told to you in the first 45 minutes of playing the prologue. Kevin, I don't want to come off as always a negative Nancy, and we have plenty of positive things to say as we go through this prologue, but this is something that Trails games do. A lot of video games do, which is to not give the player the opportunity to skip the prologue. And but I don't mean prologue, I mean tutorial. Let me explain. So this happens a lot with Pokemon. Pokemon Red was my first ever video game. I have been a Pokemon trainer since the days I could read, and I know this because I learned how to read by playing Pokemon Red. So I know how to catch a Pokemon. And yet, in every single Pokemon game that is released by Game Freak, you have to be taught how to catch a Pokemon. I'm almost 30, and it hasn't changed at all. There is no innovations to be presented at all. At least with Trails, things change a little bit game to game. But that being said, guys, I know what turn bonuses are. I know what S breaks are. I know what crafts are. I know what quartzes are. And they haven't changed that much in this game other than giving us the master quartz, which is like the one thing that they don't give you a tutorial on. Can we stop that maybe? Maybe have like a checkbox when you started the game saying, hey, do you need a tutorial? If you don't need a tutorial, we won't give you a tutorial. If you do need a tutorial, we'll give you a tutorial. But I don't need the tutorial. And it takes forever.
Yeah, as someone who loaded clear save data from Zero, I mean, I have not suffered a catastrophic brain injury in the intervening 5 weeks. I don't know how big a demographic
Yeah,
that is of the Kaseki player base. I hope very small to zero, but we don't need it. It's silly. It's just a bunch of shenanigans, and it's just a weird design choice. I have to imagine, I don't know, but I have to imagine it would be fairly simple to have a skippable tutorial somewhere in some option, or you press X to skip or A to keep going. I don't know. It seems not the most difficult.
I think part of it is the fact that they're trying to weave it all into the plot. So, like, we have these new Enigma devices, which means that we get Metroided and we don't have access to our old quartz anymore. To which I raised the question to Kevin, if you're about to enter into a super secret, super important operation in order to arrest the former Speaker of the House and also a demon man, why are we using this year's model with no quartz when we could use last year's model with all of the quartz? Maybe hold off on making the migration. But also, the point that you make kind of puts insult to injury to what I was talking about, because the game had just confirmed right before giving us a tutorial that we have beaten the previous entry. It'd be one thing if we didn't, if there was no expectation, but the game literally knows that we have beaten the last game. That being said, we're being quite critical. What did you think of the prologue overall, now that we're getting some of this critical stuff out of the way?
I thought it was good. Overall, the new party members, I was surprised at how many new ones there were for this prologue. The special appearance at the end by my namesake was fun. I liked how we got some world built, maybe not the right word, world building after the end, but more information on the situation for Crossbell in the intervening couple of months, and I especially like, and we'll talk more about this when we get to it, the game did not hide the new SSS members, did not make us wait chapter after chapter, 30% into the game. We know the expanded SSS at the end of the prologue, so I do enjoy that. I thought the boss fights were fine. The monsters were fine. The combat, it was annoying not having any quartz for the most part. We get one or two, but overall it was B. Not much to write home about at the end of the day, but it did not detract from opening into the last game of the Crossbell duology.
Question for you. So, in previous entries, maybe not Trails the Third, but in Sky FC, in Sky SC, and Zero, the prologues were hefty. Like in Zero, we went around the entire city. We went through the first wing of the Geofront. With Trails FC, I mean, that prologue was like the entirety of Roland before we really got going on our way. They felt like chapters in and of themselves. This prologue, and also the prologue in Sky the Third, feels more like what you would consider to be an actual prologue. I mean, I counted at the time that it took me to do this prologue. Granted, I was playing on high speed because it's combat mostly. But it took me an hour and 30 minutes. Like, there have been episodes that we've recorded that have been longer than it took me to play the prologue. On the one hand, that doesn't leave it with a lot of substance to really dissect. On the other hand, it throws us straight into the action. We have some resolution from the previous game, and we're already setting up. And part of the benefits of introducing the new characters, but they're characters that we already know, Noel, Wazi, means that we don't have to waste a lot of time getting to know them and we can jump right in. What kind of prologue do you prefer as a player?
So I want to push back on one thing you said, how the length of the prologue, 90 minutes, does not leave perhaps the most for discussion. You can have a lot of narrative, plot, even gameplay dense material in 90 minutes of watching, playing, what say you. So I think that there's not that much here to discuss. It's not entirely a reflection of the somewhat shorter length. I can definitely imagine 90 minutes of content that would take a 90-minute episode or an hour episode, whatever. Two, this prologue, the prologue for the third, and to a lesser extent
Sure.
SC, the not new settings. We know Liberal, we know Crossbell. Zero and FC are introducing us to new settings, while FC to an entirely new game universe. So I think I get why they're longer, why these are shorter. There's not as much built into hooking the player into the Kaseki series as a whole, into this crossbell for the first time, leaving all the people that we know in Liberal.
So then what do you think about the SC prologue? Because that one took a while. I mean, that was the trading camp, right, in Lehman State.
That was the training camp in Lehman State with Annalise, and that also really got us to what's Estelle's headspace like without Joshua. I think that was important to really develop that. Maybe not in the entirety. There was some fat to be trimmed, but I do not recall disliking the SC prologue because of length. I think it did a lot
No,
of really needed character work for Estelle to make this hole she's in climbing out of it throughout Essie before Joshua. And after meeting Joshua, it was an integral part of her character and her plot, and the game's plot too.
I think you raise a good question, and maybe we want to save it till later because we have a pretty bad habit of thinking of questions out of order, and then even sometimes saying we'll talk about that later, and then we don't talk about it later. But you asserted, and I think that you're right that the point of the SC prologue is to explore Estelle's headspace after her traumatic breakup with Joshua. What is the prologue here trying to get us to do? What's its job?
Okay, what is the status of the characters in the world at the end of Zero? What's the status at the beginning of the prologue, at the end of the prologue? For Tio, Randy, Ellie, it's the same. There's no change, they're not present. So,
Well, Ellie comes back at the end of the prologue.
very end, but not in a great extent. Lloyd doesn't change character.
Abstractly, he does because he's been training with the first division. So we might assume that there's like some skills or something he picked up.
His skill set, but I don't think like his character space, his self, capital S.
Yeah, I would agree.
Tie up the loose thread of Ernest and Hartman from the end of Zero.
Well, and that's something that's important. And something else that it's doing, it's putting the demonic, right? This transformation into a devil that Ernest does. Like that's one of the first things we see in this game. So it's not hiding the supernatural; it's putting it right front and center.
And what did the prologue of Zero do? And for the first couple chapters, I remember commenting more than once how the mundane seems to be dominant. Maybe the mundane takes a back seat to some extent in Azure. So we're getting this thematic flip.
Yeah, could be. Or maybe it's not a thematic flip. Well, I'm thinking of thematic flip in that Zero goes from the mundane to the supernatural. So a flip would go from like supernatural to the mundane. I don't know if we want to say that, but certainly I think there is a development where Zero is supposed to have prepared us for the supernatural mixing in with the mundane to the point that when we see this man, and this is something that the Trail series has been doing, that when we see this man transform into a devil, and when we see Kevin come in and like do his thaumaturgy and Neoplatonic shit, that it makes sense. There's no cognitive dissonance with any of that. And so maybe its job is introducing these themes to us, the player, so that we can get the ball rolling.
Essie and to a greater extent the third were very much heavily supernatural. What's the end of FC? It's a coup, a military coup. What's the end of SC? It's the aureole, the pillars. So I think it's going to be supernatural heavily throughout Azure. Mundane, yes, to be sure. But the cult, demonification, I bet the society some way will be involved and they're heavily tied to the supernatural. They use the mundane as the vehicle for the supernatural. So I do think that is it. You are right to center this guy turned into a fucking demon.
Yeah, but what's interesting, okay, I had a question about the demon transformation because he claims to know the experience that Gunter went through during the final boss. He says like we know what feelings Gunter had. I'm doing this just like Gunter did, but how does he know? Because Gunter, as far as I could tell, transformed into a demon for the first time in front of us. And then we killed him. I didn't see him have time to pass down records, leave testimony, anything like that. I don't think Ernest was in the room when that happened.
No, he was not. It was only somehow then. Only thing I can think of is some previously hitherto unexplained, unmentioned, and if so, that's bad. Mind meld, mind link, supernatural telepathy, or whatever. But that's narratively weak, if so, because there's been no preparation, no explanation to suggest it's possible. But that's the only thing I can think of.
The other possibility is that we are wrong, or I am wrong, to assume that the first time Gunter turns into a demon is right in front of us. At the very least, he knew it would happen when he took the Gnosis.
But of all the other transformations that we've seen in the Kaseki series thus far, it seems irreversible.
But at the very least, we haven't seen anybody reverse it. Like we didn't see Weissman. No, we did see Weissman reverse. Remember, he turns into his demon form, but he ends up being killed by Kevin while he's in a human form.
There's that. And so maybe what Gunter did in his second stage, the final form, was different, whereas a lesser or partial or secondary demonification can be walked back from.
Or maybe even the form that Gunter did do is able to be reversed, and we just killed him before it could happen.
Yeah, that could be it. So it's still a bit odd to drop this without context, but it's not quite as weird as I had initially thought.
I wanted to talk to you about your reaction to Kevin, because I know that you typically don't like returning characters, but at the same time, you seem to respond quite excitedly. But before we get to that, tell me your thoughts about Arios and Dudley. You know, we've had Dudley as a party member before. We never had Arios as a member of the party before.
We began the game, Noel and Lloyd, level 45. I don't know how much of that is that's the base and how much is you get a bonus for clearing 0. Arios? Okay. Arios and Dudley are level 60. So this Ludo narrative connection joining going on. We are told Arios and to a lesser extent Dudley are more experienced, better fighters, better a lot than Noel, than Lloyd, who are very much junior career members. Orios is 60. His main attack gives a portion of damage dealt returned as HP, which is very powerful. Dudley has good arts, a good ranged weapon. Powerful, not quite as much as Orios. They're heavily useful party members. So much so that they get taken away about midway through. The game lets us use them for a mini boss fight, takes them away, then it's just Lloyd and Noel to go through to fight the boss, and we don't play them until the very final boss fight, second stage.
Yeah.
And those two, Arios especially, carried that final boss fight. So I liked it as Arios is head and shoulders above everyone else. He almost soloed the final boss when everyone else was downed. I had run out of the resurrection items and we did not have any arts to, terrify or no, Thalos. So it was Arios, the one man show, essentially.
Are you playing on hard again?
No, Colin, I'm playing on Nightmare.
I am playing normal and I'm happy about it. That sounds like ass.
Because I just cannot wait for you to be the recipient of all these late night frustrated messages when I complain about this effing boss. So stupid. I hate the game. I hate my life. Oh, wait, I won. It's wonderful.
I mean, like we've talked about this, how, and I experienced it with the third, where like putting it at a higher difficulty really does help you engage more with the game. And it's just not something that I particularly want to do.
Listeners, you have it direct from the horse's mouth. Colin does not want to engage with the game.
Hey, we need to express a wide diversity and variety of viewpoints on the Trails series in this podcast. So you can be the hardcore gamer. I can be the filthy casual that's just there for the story, while still bitching when it's too easy.
My, how the turntables, ever since pulling a Kevin, got into common parlance in FC.
Yeah, we still use that phrase to this day. I think the only reason why is because you are given more opportunities to do it on account of you play on the harder difficulty.
Well, you can't pull a Kevin on Nightmare. Maybe you can on Horde, but there's no retry but weaker on Nightmare.
Oh, interesting. We could change it to pulling a Colin, but I'm not going to do that. I have to say, I really like the ludonarrative connections
No.
that they're doing with the levels that you had brought up.
No.
Because it does feel materially like Dudley and Arios are a step above Lloyd and Noel. But then by removing Arios and Dudley, we can see that Lloyd and Noel, who had perhaps been overshadowed in the previous fights, can stand on their own. They are up there. They're up to the challenge. They belong in the same sphere. It's just that these other two are better. I did think it was weird that Dudley and Arios are the same level. You're right that Arios still comes off as more powerful, but why couldn't Dudley have been like level 55, whereas Arios was 60, or something like that, just to further reinforce the notions that we have?
Who's Dudley? He's a experienced investigator with the Crossbell Police Department First Division. Who is Arios? He is the Divine Blade, and I believe that's a title for super awesome bracers, because Cassius is also a Divine Blade.
So it's not for bracers specifically. It's just that the two that we know are part of the Bracer Guild. But these are people who have achieved mastery of a particular form of the eight leaves, one blade style, or however you want to call that. Annalise is also a practitioner of that style. She is not a divine blade.
Okay, so he is a master of a sword fighting style. He's internationally known. Cassius has to know who he is.
Yeah.
Does Cassius know who Dudley is? I would be absolutely shocked if Dudley was known outside of Crossbell to anyone but the intelligence branches.
Was so we know that Arios and Guy were part of the operation to clear the lodges that Cassius was also part of. Was Dudley there for those?
I believe he was, but it would be different. Like, oh yeah, he was on the task force versus, holy goodness, it's Arios McLean.
I mean, yeah, definitely the prestige, the status would be different, but I don't know if we can say that Cassius. There's no way that Cassius would know who Dudley is, though I could be wrong, and that if Dudley was not part of this, then we're wrong and we have no evidence.
Arios was not part of the task force. I bet people would know him outside of Crossbell. If Dudley was not, I doubt people would.
Well, I think we also need to think about the context because when Arios was a member of the of that operation, I think he was still part of the police, right? But he only really achieves international renown with the Bracer Guild because it's an international
Yeah,
organization and he's called in to handle international disputes, whereas Dudley has just been a good policeman.
that's true. That's true. So maybe the standard of comparison I'm using is not the most fair. But
Well, but speaking of international organizations. There's one even more international than the Bracer Guild, and that's the Church of Idea. Tell us about your feelings when Kevin, I forget his last name, comes onto the stage.
Graham,
Yeah, Kevin Graham.
there was a network of confusing emotions. Noel and Lloyd beat the first stage of the boss. Then Arios and Dudley come when the boss has the inevitable transformation when Ernest goes to stage 2. I sent off a hasty, I guess we have another beat the boss, doesn't really count, we get saved, but then we fight them again, so it's lesser.
Well, my favorite part is I said, "Who saved you?" And you said Arios and Dudley, and I just reply with, "Oh, you're not there yet. Okay."
Then we have the boss fight, and then it's not Kevin saving us. We defeat Ernest, and he's dying. He's like
Yeah.
coming apart. And Kevin comes in not to save the Dudley, Arios, Lloyd, and Noel, but to save the body and the heavy subtext, the soul of Ernest. Get him on the right path while so he can face justice for his crimes. Do I like Lloyd being so much of a namby-pamby about this objectively awful person dying, same as Gunter? I don't, to be honest, but I do appreciate and like how Kevin did not save the party members. He saved the bad guys, focus on the soul, on the body, not gonna get off scot-free. So I did enjoy that.
So, question for you, because okay, the whole point of a priest caring for somebody's soul, like even if they're a criminal or something like that, that's very Judeo-Christian oriented, right? That's like what a Catholic priest is supposed to do, and that's what Kevin is doing here to some extent. Whereas Lloyd is caring about like the person himself in some case, but how do I put this? In terms of the office, it seems as if Kevin would be more priest-like than Lloyd. But in terms of their overall personality, Kevin is not particularly priest-like. Lloyd here is being way more pure. Why do you like it when Kevin can be merciful to a criminal, but you don't like it when Lloyd cares about a criminal?
I've seen the limits to Kevin's tolerance. I saw what he did to Weissman. No notes, cold, no regrets. And that was before his big arc and development in the third, but he is still the type, if he thinks it's necessary, to kill. So I know there's a core of steel that Kevin's compassion does not come from inexperience, unexposure to the realities of the world. Kevin's compassion comes with brushing with the darkness, acknowledging it as a part of him, and trying and choosing to do good all the while, even so.
Did Kevin get a new name? Like he was known as the Heretic Hunter. Did he get a new one at the end of the third?
He did. I don't believe it's been said.
I mean, it just I think this episode bleh, kind of goes to show that that arc that he had gone through in the third is impacting his character here because, as you say, he had no mercy against Weissman, right? Turned him into salt. Whereas with this guy, he cooperated with Lloyd's attempts to, like, keep him alive. This is something a heretic hunter would have done. This is literally a heretic to hunt.
Yes, but let me play Kevin's advocate here. Ernest was expressing some kind of remorse or fear. He was not happy about the way this had all turned out. Weissman was more, how can I regroup and get my plans back in operation again?
Oh, what? So just because your demonic transformation and attempt to conquer the entire state didn't go your way and you're sad about it means that you deserve mercy?
Me, personally, if this Kevin was there, I could see not intervening, but it's not like he's gonna get off scot-free. It's complex. But Kevin's a priest for he's a Growl's Ritter. And I don't know. I'm not sure. Lloyd can come off as naive, and that colors his worldview, his interaction. Kevin is not that. Even before his growth, even after his growth, he is not naive. He knows what the world, so maybe I'm just more of a Kevin stan, but I guess I see it as Kevin trying to stop Ernest from going completely down the path where he has to be killed.
What you're saying is that Ernest needs to realize the importance of being earnest.
I'm not going to acknowledge that as worthy of response, Colin.
Please clap.
You do raise a point. I called Lloyd naive, not Kevin. I don't know. It may just be more of a Kevin stan.
Maybe. I think you're a bit biased. Or as my students would say, a bit biased. Shall we move to the final part when we're actually in Altair? You're saying no? What else are we going to talk about?
Colin, we have to talk about Hartman.
There's like nothing to talk about with Hartman.
No, actually, I do think there is, unironically.
We'll talk about him then.
So Hartman is with Ernest. He's very much the unwilling partner. He doesn't think he has any chance of getting into political power, even safety. He would be very willing to throw himself on the mercy of the Crossbell justice system if it meant getting away from Ernest. He realized he chained himself to a tiger, and he's the only one left, and the tiger is hungry. But Colin, Hartman said when Ernest brought up, you went to Paradise. That's the an all but named brothel that the society was running. Hartman said he is as much as a victim. Yes, that the cult was running.
The cult was running, not the society.
Hartman said he was drugged. He is as much of a victim. I mean, he's being hyperbolic, but it's a guy who we were given to believe is a villain. His culpability heavily reduced. And to be honest, I don't like it. I wish the game had the courage to say, yeah, this guy's a coward. He also sucks.
Question for you. Just because he says he was drugged, does that mean he was drugged?
Does the narrative give us reason to believe he's lying?
He's a politician.
Who's his audience? There's no one else there at the time but Ernest. So what's the point within the text of lying?
I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I think that somebody who is being faced with the consequences of their actions will sometimes make up stories that even they themselves believe in order to justify it. It also could be that he's trying to think outside of the box in order to excuse himself in front of Ernest. I mean, I have seen people who know that they've done terrible things lie in private about doing those terrible things. This is not an unhuman thing to do.
Yes, they're called freshmen.
That and stepbrothers who are in jail. Basically the same. I mean, I just
So there, okay, I had not considered that perspective of this delusion that is more comforting. It absolves him of culpability, of responsibilities. I'll concede on that point.
I mean, I think that I have to be clear though. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm saying that's the feeling that I got when I saw that. I didn't get the impression that Hartman was being truthful with Ernest in that. But I could be wrong.
You're not saying you're right, you're just implying it.
I am I am assert I am arguing, which is what my students call
Yes.
asserting things. I might, by the way, for those who wonder why I keep bringing this up, I might have just graded
Yes.
like a fuck ton of papers today. So they might be on my mind.
You know what's on Reese's mind? Chestnuts.
That's true.
So,
Wait, they're called chestnuts, Kevin. They're not chestnuts.
chestnuts.
You don't pronounce the T. Chestnuts. They're nuts for your chest.
After we escape the suspiciously working and in order temple facility, we go to the city of Altair. It's our very first time we see something in Calvert.
Yes, that's true.
Lloyd and Reese and Arios and Dudley say goodbye to Kevin. Kevin is not allowed, not welcome in Crossbow State, not because of the government, but because the Archbishop Erolda does not like the Gralls Ritter, which we met the Archbishop, the not the best, nicest in Zero, but I don't blame that position of extrajudicial assassins coming in.
I mean, I'm kind of surprised that he's allowed to do that, though. I mean, yes, you call them extrajudicial. It's extrajudicial from a state's perspective. It is not extrajudicial from the church's perspective. You know, this would be like if the Archbishop of Rochester didn't like it if the Swiss Guard popped up and so banned the Swiss Guard from coming to America.
Let me give a hypothesis and you tell me if you think it's credible or not. Different chains of hierarchy: priest, deacon, bishop, archbishop, the pope. I believe it's called the pope. The pope. So there's that. Different chain,
Yeah, the Pope is the head.
Gralsritter, pope. And so maybe they have the parallel hierarchies. The archbishop is the same or higher, and unless or until the pope says you have to welcome, the archbishops can make it unwelcome. I don't know if I forget if Kevin said he's unwelcome, like the archbishop does not want to see him.
No, they are expressly forbidden from entering Crossbell. The Gralsritter are, which, by the way, would include because they don't even say the Gralsritter. It's the what the hell do they call it? The something of the Congregation for the Sacraments is what they call the Gralsritter, which means that Reese is also forbidden from going, and she's hiding. She just figures that she'd be better at hiding than Kevin, which is probably right. So in order to confirm slash deny what you've said, there are different branches of the church, different congregations as they were, of which the Gralsritter is one. And I believe that, stuff like the archbishops and stuff like that belong to the other. But I would not draw such a sharp delineation between lower clergy like that, because we have to remember that Kevin is a priest. You say that he is. You even said before that he's a priest before he's a Gralsritter. I don't think there's a distinction to be made there. It's much as if, well, no, I was about to say as if all monks are priests. That's not true. There are quite a few monks that are not priests, but they're not mutually exclusive categories.
So maybe Reese is sworn to the church. She has taken orders. Yes? So the archbishop could just say, I don't care whatever status you have. You're a priest. You're sworn to the church. You're not welcome. I'm the archbishop. Yeah, but she is, yeah. But she's still taking an oath to the church. Yeah.
Well, Reese is not a priest. She's a squire in the Gralsritter. Yeah, to the wider thing. Yes, they all belong to the church. Which is why I had expressed my surprise that the archbishop is able to prevent members of this other wing of the church from entering, because I guess it's showing some fragmentation, decentralization of control within the church.
Could a Navy captain give orders to an Army lieutenant?
I believe that it's not as if the Navy officer could give orders to the lieutenant, but the lieutenant, like if the lieutenant stepped foot on his ship or his jurisdiction, he would be underneath the Navy officer.
Maybe it's like that. I don't know, as a comparison. Yeah, they have your own separate thing, but if you're in Crossbell, you got to do what I say unless there's a very special dispensation.
Yeah, though I don't think that like the expressed forbidden, the expressed excising of the Grossritter from Crossbell is different than the authority a naval or a naval or an Air Force
Yeah.
person would have over an army thing. It's not like we have the Secretary of the Navy decrying all members of the Marines shall not enter Navy bases.
Why would the Pope accept this?
That's what we don't know.
Maybe it's there's no reports of artifacts. Crossbell is volatile enough on its own. The society is not involved. We're going to bow to the wishes of the man on the ground.
Maybe we're going to have to see. I mean, Kevin says that he thinks that the snakes are moving, which is clearly about Ouroboros on account of an Ouroboros is a symbol of a snake biting its own ass tail.
And we saw in the previous game, Joaquin Gunter explicitly says, as of then, neither the society nor the church have a presence in Crossbell.
Yes, or the Grossritter. The church clearly has a
Grossritter.
presence in Crossbell. There's the cathedral right there.
Outside the city, which is interesting.
Yeah, like right outside.
You know what's also interesting? Trains that take you from Altair to Crossbell, because that's what Lloyd and Noel.
But Lowell, Yuri Lowell.
Lloyd and Noel do. Well,
what was interesting about the train ride?
The transition to Crossbell in the final scene of the prologue.
Personally, maybe it's because I'm jaded and because I've been a little bit burnt out about trails lately. I didn't find the final scene to be that interesting myself. It's a bunch of Kia running up. Okay, here's what had happened. What had happened was, first of all, Kia runs up to Lord, gives him a big hug. It's adorable. It's Kia. Ain't nobody got a problem with Kia. Then Bran runs up to Noel, does the same thing. Meanwhile, my roommate is making dinner and turns to me and says, "You know what the problem is? All of these Japanese voice actors sound like they're having an orgasm."
You know, I honestly have no idea what to say in response to that, besides there is going to be a tiny little E next to the podcast this episode.
I decide when to put we have talked about more explicit things than a comment my roommate has made. But yeah, so what did you find interesting about the reunion scene, other than the fact that Wazzy comes out of the woodwork and kind of flirts with Lloyd a little bit, and then Sergei declares the SSS is back in business.
So there's that. We don't beat about the bush with the two new members. I had predicted Noel, so give me right points on that, Colin. I did not predict Wazzy. I still can have Rishamel.
Yes, I say you got one right, you got one wrong.
Jury is still out. So there's that.
That's correct.
What do the SSS have now? Someone in the politics, Ellie. Two people with connections to the military, Randy and Noel. The underworld, Wazzy. Orbital arts, yeah, exactly that. Orbital arts, magic type stuff with Tio. So they have a lot of ears to the ground in a lot of important sectors of Crossbell and international.
But also kind of Randy, right? Because the Jaeger connection.
Players who will be interested in Crossbell. So that's something to note. It's interesting. I thought Sergei declared the SSS reinstated not when 3 of the 4, they were still gone. Randy, Tio, Ellie. It's a new SSS. I mean, they'll be joining back.
No, Ellie is there, dude. Ellie is there.
Fuck, I am so...
I have to say, like, we should go through the episodes and count every single time you get something wrong about Ellie. Like once when you claimed that she was sick for no reason.
And I like her a lot. Ernest has this weird fixation on Ellie. He can get her when he rolls Crossbell. Weird buddy. Okay, there.
Oh, he's clearly an incel for Ellie.
I mean, he knew her when she was a kid, almost certainly, so...
That is not a boundary. Like, that is not a barrier that Trails is afraid of.
Is Ernest a groomer?
I don't think we can go that far.
50 minutes of discussion.
If he's a groomer, he's not successful.
But one day, we'll have to talk about, does the SSS have healthy dynamics? Because I do think that could be a great fodder for discussion.
I feel like for that episode, all we have to do is put Tio on the board and have you rant for 60 minutes about child labor.
Have you ever seen Supernatural?
I feel like I watched an episode or two because I had a crush on a girl in college that liked that show. And then when we started dating, I stopped watching.
One of the angels tells the third Winchester brother, you can't ever get between them. They are psychotically, irrationally, erotically codependent, and it's played for laughs, but there's found family, and JRPGs love that trope. And then there's codependency, and JRPGs sure seem to back into that trope unintentionally. But that's, I just think they're codependent. I don't think it's the healthiest dynamics, lack of boundaries between the social, the personal, and the professional spheres they inhabit. But that's for the future, Colin, because the SSS has been reinstated. We have the entire game ahead of us. What's left to talk about is the future wide open. Cannot wait to explore Azure, Crossbow, what I suspect, the supernatural, get stuff wrong.
We do.
Until then, I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.